Hallelujah. Let Lord Jesus Christ shine forth. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining us. Welcome to another live stream with TCCI Ministries. This is our second live stream today. You might be thinking I've got nothing else to do, but all I'm trying to live my life in exile. And tonight we do have Dr. J. Smith with us. We will go through quick reflection on his debate with, I think David Wood doctor as well, with David Wood on did Mohammed exist? But before I kind of say hi to him, and those of you who are in the chat, thank you very much for being available and joining us. For us to have healthy conversation and healthy discussion, please do not share individuals' personal details. Please do not abuse and harass my chat. That means do not copy and paste the same message again and again within 1 minute. And also please don't be here in the intention of changing the topic. So we will be talking about did Muhammad, so-called prophet of Islam, existed, and Jay Smith is going to help us to think through. I did ask him to join us because I sacrificed my beauty sleep last weekend and watched his debate with David Wood, and I saw how David Wood demolished Jay Smith's arguments. Therefore, I wanted to give him chance for him to resurrect again. But let me just put something serious. David Wood and Jay Smith had a debate on did Mohammed, prophet of Islam, existed or not. Doesn't matter which side did well or doesn't matter which side had good arguments. Bottom line for me as a Christian who does the work of evangelist, both sides, which side like we pick, both sides destroy Islam. David Wood points out that Muhammad is really bad and dangerous man and false prophet. Jay Smith points out actually he wasn't really existed at all, and both sides points out Muslim people need Lord Jesus Christ for them to have eternal life, for them to have fellowship with our triune God. They need to give up Islam and come to Lord Jesus Christ, accept him as the eternal Son of God, and by believing in him they will have life. But since I did ask Jay Smith to come and resurrect his destruction, I don't know what would you say that to Jay. Peace of Christ be with you, brother. How are you?
Really good. Thank you for having me on.
Do you feel, Jay? Do you feel that David Wood destroyed you?
I hope you say that tongue in cheek. Almost everybody on the comments is now basically said that David Wood was destroyed in that debate. And there's a reason why. I mean, we go through it and unpack it.
Did people said that?
Look at the
That's
comments.
not good at all. I don't do comments, Jay.
You need to see how people reacted to that debate. And really, what's going on here? Let me just unpack it for you, Hatun. I can see that you're disillusioned like David Wood because you absolutely have to have Muhammad in the 9th century because you.
No. I watched the debate, Jay. I watched the debate, and I noticed that how it's been expressed that your argument has holes in it.
All right, where are the holes? Tell me right now.
Oh, well, I'll let you to make your case first.
I want to hear your holes.
Well, first of all, about the Haran. Haran is a huge hole when it comes to Mecca. But there are lots of other things. So for me,
Let's just take it on board real quickly.
for me,
Hatun,
bottom
what do
line
you know
is.
about Haran, and what do you know about Edessa, and what do you know about Mecca?
So for me, bottom line is, we will practice your arguments and we will practice David Wood's arguments as evangelist. And both sides just gives me material to destroy Islam so that Muslim people will come to Lord Jesus Christ. That's for me, bottom line is this. And I can see someone believes you defeated David Wood. That's already heartbreaking. You've got lots of fans in this chat, Jay.
Okay, let me just go ahead and give you an overview of why we even did this debate. I think that to lead up to it,
Yeah.
this is material that I have been working on since 1995. So this is not new material for me. For 25 years, when I first started when I sat under Dr. Gerald Hotting's tutelage in his class, and I first was introduced to the difficulties with the 7th century, the fact that there's just nothing at all from the 7th century to support a man named Mohammed, or to support a city called Mecca, or to support a caliphate of Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali. These names just don't exist in the 7th century. We don't find them on any inscription. We can't find them on any documents. We can't find them in any reference material that we can date from that early. They only start to appear in the 8th, and then they come to fruition in the 9th, which is around 200 to 300 years later. So when I started hearing this in 1994, I remember taking this down to Speaker's Corner, Hatun, and introducing this at Speaker's Corner, and the enormous backlash I got then. So I'm used to this kind of backlash, and I'm used to most everybody that comes back and has thrown a argument against it was not the argument that David used. And this is what was puzzling to me. The argument that David used, the principle of embarrassment, is the same argument he used with our good friend Robert Spencer back in 2012. In fact, I was sitting there waiting for him to come up with something new. 8 years later, I thought maybe he had come on something new. And as I was there, I had an empty piece of paper next to me with my pen. You can see I'm waiting to write on it. I didn't write a word on it. Why? Because right next to that paper was another paper of the review of Robert Spencer's debate. And all David Wood did is resurrect his points from that debate 8 years ago. And he just went through category after category of what he thought were embarrassing, which is what he has been doing for 10 years. That's all David Wood does with Muhammad, is he throws out one embarrassing fact after another. It is his whole life is based on embarrassing Muhammad. As I realized, I said, this man has not really been keeping up with the latest information and does not know about the newest evidence. Now, remember, there is a much stronger debate than principle of embarrassment. See if you can think what it is. When he got up there and he started his debate by looking at the camera and saying, Muslims, I'm on your side. I'm actually debating for you. You should be supporting what I'm going to say. You know good and well he was saying that tongue in cheek. I almost burst out laughing when I heard him say that, because I assumed that he would be arguing for the Muslims. There is no Muslim in the world that would argue for principle of embarrassment, for one obvious reason. Not only do they not agree with it, they don't see these facts as embarrassing. The vast majority of Muslims that I've come across, of the 10 different categories that he used, only 2 of them could be embarrassing. The other 8 can all be explained, as Robert Spencer did so efficiently back in 2012. As I repeated, and I just used Robert Spencer's criteria. David didn't really engage with those 8. The other 3 that he talked about, being covered with sperm, sucking somebody's thumb, lick it, come and stop and think about it. Being covering with someone's sperm actually aggrandizes him. These actually are in the same category of showing the virility of the man. But as a Christian and as somebody from the 21st century looking at that, of course that's troubling. Of course that's embarrassing. Thank God we don't have these kind of stories for Jesus. But we do have stories for Jesus that are embarrassing. Look at the Gnostic counts. In fact, look at the infancy gospel of Thomas, written in 185 AD. Look at the Jesus that's in that account. That Jesus is full of embarrassment, and it's mostly about his childhood. He not only takes revenge on people, he blinds people, he cripples people, and he kills people. Now, that's the Gnostic view of Jesus. Those are about 200 years later. They're about the same time that Ibn Hisham is writing his account of Muhammad. So you want to do like with like, then I would suggest David go to the Gnostic accounts of Jesus and show how embarrassing those are. Why is it the church never accepted them? Why did they not accept them? The Gnostics accepted him. The Gnostics believed Jesus was this kind of character. Why did the church not accept it? Because they already knew who Jesus was from the first century. They already had count after count. They had two eyewitness accounts and two other accounts who got it from the eyewitnesses from the first century. Why in the world would they go to something 200 years later that shows all these embarrassing facts about Jesus? In the same token, if David is given evidence as he was on the day, I gave him 30 different arguments. I went 30 different slides. I had to do it in 20 minutes. So, of course, I could not unpack all of them. And he was not ready to defend or even confront any one of those. And he certainly was not ready to accept any one of those 30 pieces of evidence. Instead, he just went right back to his same mantra. It was a mantra. We heard the same thing in every one of the times that he went up to speak. He said it in his opening statement. He said it in his first rebuttal. He said it in his second rebuttal. And he repeated it in his conclusion. And all he could come up with argument or principle of embarrassment. To me, that is not worthy of a debate. And that's not worthy of an opponent that's trying to shut down Muhammad. And I would suggest that David do his homework a little bit better next time, because you cannot keep the same arguments for 8 years and hope that people are going to believe it. And that's why I think we need to be careful. The material that we are now coming up with, and listen, the guys that I want to give a shout out to, people like Mel from Sneakers Corner, people like Bala, and also Murad, who is from the Middle East, who's actually reading the original documents in both Aramaic and in Arabic. We've got to give these guys credit. People like Joe, I can't tell you where he's from. This is the new generation of historians that are coming up, and they are looking at the material, not from the 8th and 9th, they are looking at material from the 7th century, and what they're coming up with is not only mind-boggling, but also makes sense politically. It also makes sense from the time of what was happening in the 7th century. So that's why I would suggest either David get and understand and learn this new material, and I would say the same thing for the rest of you. Look and see what we're coming up with. This is the first debate where we've actually put it out in a public context. We've been putting up videos after videos, but this is the first time we put it up in a public context. Now, I'm going to stop there, but I want us to come back on me and tell me what is the argument he should have used? The argument he did not use, the much more damaging argument that he didn't even mention on the day. There is an argument that the Muslims are putting out there, and the Muslims have been doing this since 1995. When I had my first debate with Dr. Jamal Badawi, his response to all this new material was absolutely devastating at that time. Why did not David use it?
Okay, let me just clarify something that none of us gets any confused. So this debate took place between two beloved ones, okay, and and in both occasions it's absolutely fine, because arguments David would put forward, we can use those arguments with our Muslim friends in the intention of destroying Islam and helping Muslims to become a Christian. And same the arguments Jay brought forth. So I don't think I am in a place to say maybe arguments needs to be updated or anything. All I just wanted to hear from you, Jay, summary of, because people thought actually you did very well, and I just wanted to have you again give us some reflections, as well as summarize once again for us, so that, because we need repetitions. Once we listen again, we will learn better and then put that in practice with our evangelism. That is the kind of purpose of all. So I don't want anyone to kind of come to the conclusion with thinking like, seriously, two brothers destroyed one another. No, point was two brothers stood up and they destroyed Mohammed kind of publicly. That's kind of point overall. Yes,
well,
Jay.
I'm still waiting, though, Hatun, for the argument he should have used. Can you tell me what's the argument he should have used?
I don't know, Jay.
The argument he should have used is argument from silence. This is the argument every Muslim will use, and we've got to discuss this. We've got to unpack this, because the argument from silence is by far the most efficient argument that all Muslims have been using since I introduced it back in that debate at Cambridge University in 1995. And David didn't mention it once. And yet we're going to be amiss if we don't tackle that argument, because that is much more difficult to tackle. And it is the one that has been hounding me for 25 years. The argument principle of embarrassment is nothing more than saying, let me continue with my ministry, let me continue to knock Muhammad down. It's not a valid argument, because not only is it a late argument, but because much of the material that he used as examples are not really embarrassing. They are not embarrassing, not to a Muslim from the 9th century, not to a person from that part of the world at that time. They are only embarrassing for those of us who are Christian, who do see these as something that is not respectable and not worthy of a man of God, to say nothing of the prophet of God, to say nothing the seal of all prophets. But the argument from silence, I think, is the most difficult one for us to answer. And I think this is the one that we really need to tackle, Hatun. And let me do that right now, because I'll show you how you can flip that on its head. When I did this debate in 1995, there at Cambridge University, Jamal Badawi was not prepared, just like David was not prepared for these. And I only gave 10 historical problems, all of them which I got from Dr. Patricia Krona. I'd been in her office that week before. I had gone through these. She said, use this, don't use this. Here's a better way to say it. Here's some better sources. And she basically gave me the 10 points that I introduced there in 1995. Jamal Badawi had not heard even one of them. And yet he is the world authority on the Quran at that time in the English language in 1995. The fact that he could not respond to it, the only response he could say is, Jay, who cares? None of this is you cannot support any of these from the 7th century, because there is nothing there in the 7th century. You're only arguing from silence. And evidence of absence is not absence of evidence. You've heard this phrase before. It's the typical phrase we always get. Just because we don't have evidence for Muhammad doesn't mean he didn't exist. Just because we don't have evidence for Mecca doesn't mean it did not exist. Just because we don't have evidence for any manuscript from the time of Uthman or any of these people called Muslims or any religion called Islam doesn't mean they didn't exist. It's just that we haven't found the evidence yet. It will be uncovered in time. Meanwhile, let's go with what we have in the 9th and 10th century, redacted back to the 7th century, and let's assume that they are correct. And that's all that I've been getting, and that's all that I've been fortunate on me. And it's a good argument, and it's a brilliant argument, because it is an argument that Christians have used also for the whole premise of whether we know Abraham exists, or whether we knew Moses existed, and whether we should keep the first 11 chapters of Genesis. It's what I was learning. I was taught in seminary. The argument of silence is a real problem for the Old Testament, especially the book of Genesis and later. Now, the way to answer that is, why don't we find evidence for it? And we were able to do that with the Old Testament. And that's why the Mari tablets and the Nuzi tablets, the Amarna tablets, the Ebla tablets, those 4 genre of tablets have now supported and supplemented who we now know who Abraham was. We now know where Sodom and Gomorrah were. We now know that Moses got it correct when he was writing it down. He knew exactly the customs of the day, and he got the right places at the right time with the right people doing the right things. In almost every case, we have now found that when Moses talked about things that were good 400 years before his time, he got it correct. Why? Because it is historically accurate. Now, because of that, we needed to do the same thing with Muhammad. And this is where Muhammad, we could have to ask the same thing of Muhammad. Why is it that they can't find anything about Muhammad from the 7th century? The very good reason is because the artifacts now are starting to come to the fore. These artifacts are now coming to play, like the coins. Let's start with the coins. Take a look at the coins, and you will see the coins were being minted by these Arabs who were controlling from Libya in the west all the way to Afghanistan in the east. That's a huge swath of land. Let me just put up a map before you. You can see right here. So from this part here all the way to here, that whole swath of land was under their control by the time Muawiyah comes to power in 660. All that orange area and the brown area. That includes Iran, Afghanistan, that includes Syria, Jordan, that includes Lebanon, all of Israel, that includes all of Saudi Arabia, all the way over into Libya, includes Egypt and Libya. All that swath of land was under the control during that period. They were minting coins. The reason you mint coins is not only just for commerce, you also mint coins so that you can announce who you are as the new leader. So Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali should have minted coins with their names on it, because every leader of men minted coins. Is there one coin with any of their names on it? There were coins that were coming from that time, from 630 to 640 to 650 up until 661, when Muawiyah then mints his coins. Look at the coins of Muawiyah. That's the first recognizable coins we get for someone from the Umayyad Caliphate. Yet, even Muawiyah, as late as 661 up until 680, so now we're talking about 50 years, almost 60 years by the time Muhammad has died, we have coins in the West, they are all Christian. In the East, they are all Zoroastrian. Written in Arabic, with Arabic names, with rulers' names on it, but not Abu Bakr, not Umar, not Uthman or Ali, and certainly not Muhammad's name. Nowhere. And why, if they are Muslims, why in the world are they minting coins with crosses on them over in the West and with the fire altars, Zoroastrian fire altars in the East? That is hugely damaging for Islam. And when Muawiyah, the first great caliph of the Umayyad Caliphate, who should have been a sound Muslim by that time, he says nothing about Muhammad. He rinse coins with Khusraw's face on it, and he has Bismillah, which is understandable because Bismillah would be the name for God in both Zoroastrian and also in Judaism and also in Christianity. Allah is the name that is used in Arabic from that time. But then he puts Al-Malik, he puts himself, he's referring to himself. Why in the world would he be referring to himself? Praise be unto God, the king, referring to himself. And here he has the Zoroastrian fire altar on the back, proving that in the East, he was very much accommodating the Zoroastrian. Nothing whatsoever about who he is or what he believed or about what he was about. Not until 692 do we get a coin finally that is Islamic, and that's Abdul Malik's coin, and you know the argument from there on out. Now let's go to the inscriptions. See, the inscriptions, we have 30,000 of these inscriptions. And they are all, none of them are from Mecca and Medina. Look, before we finish with the coins, notice where the coins are minted. The coins are not minted anywhere near Mecca and Medina. The coins in the West are minted in Syria and in parts of Israel. The coins in the East are all minted in Iran. And those coins are being minted while these caliphs supposedly were in power by these caliphs. Yet nothing whatsoever about these caliphs are on these coins. Remember, back in those days, they didn't have TV. They didn't have any type of newspapers or radio or internet to introduce when they came to power. They had to use coins because coins were in the hands of everybody. And that's the best way to announce who you are as the new ruler. And you always put your name, you always put your face on the coin. Then you put your religious denomination on the coin to distinguish who you represent. And then you put the date on it and where the mint comes from. In every case, there's nothing Islamic about any of those coins until Abdul Malik comes in. He introduces the Shahada, and the Shahada, take a look at the Shahada, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. And you look at Muhammad is nothing more than a title of the praised one who is the messenger of God. Who is he referring to? This is where Murad has been so helpful. Murad, who has now unpacked the 4 references to Muhammad in the Quran, in every case they are referring to the praised one, either Jesus Christ, or on the coins, it could be Abdul Malik himself. He's talking about himself as the praised one, who is the emissary, the king, like what Muawiyah did earlier as the Malik. He would be the king of God. These are the representative of God, and they're aggrandizing themselves. They see themselves in a messianic character, and this is why they're putting their name. That's why they're putting their references, and that's why they're saying praise be unto God, because they are the ones that are representing God. Now, fascinating what he does do on that one, that he puts and takes off the, he does a mockery of the Byzantine cross on the back. Because of that, Justinian II goes to war with him immediately in 691 and 692. Abdul Malik then introduces a brand new coin in 693. And on that coin, he has his own image on it with the sword there. He's now basically saying, I'm going to take you on. And there he puts the Bismillah, but then on the backside, he mocks the cross, the Byzantine cross. By 698, he then takes the image off, and he only includes reference after reference after reference attacking the person of Jesus Christ. Why? Because he is attacking Byzantine Christianity. At the same time, he builds the Dome of the Rock. All the inscriptions on the Dome of the Rock, the only ones that still last today, they are all attacking the divinity of Jesus, they're attacking the Trinity, and they're attacking Jesus' sonship. This is put there right in Jerusalem, looking down over on the Church of the Sepulchre as a one-upmanship, saying we are now the ones who are attacking everything that you continue to be holy. This is the first time that we see an attack against Byzantine Christianity. Byzantine Christianity had its pilgrimage to the Church of the Sepulchre there in Jerusalem. That's why the Dome of the Rock was built in Jerusalem. And look and see where it's heading. Look and see where it's placed towards. It is directed straight towards Petra, not Mecca. Nothing about Mecca at all in any of these mosques. And this is where Gibson's material has been so exciting, because Gibson has shown that all the mosques, not just the one there in Jerusalem, not just the Dome of the Rock, not just the Al-Aqsa, he is showing that every one of the mosques in every country, as far away as China in the east and India, Cherman, India in the east, as far away as up in the north from Turkey, down in Yemen, every one of the mosques up until 706 are facing Petra. Not one is facing Mecca. And the first mosque to face Mecca is not till 727, and that's in Banbor in Pakistan, proving that as the Umayyads, who were very much interested in Petra as the sanctuary, do not finally give in, politically speaking, to the Umayyads until 749, which comes about another 10 years later. Once they come to power, then all their mosques are facing Mecca. Why Mecca? Because of what happened with Ibn Zubayr. Look and see what Ibn Zubayr does. He rebels against Abdul Malik in 687. He's there, governor of Petra. He destroys Petra, destroys the Kaaba, and takes the black stone with him. What happens when you take the black stone with you? The black stone is where God's presence is. It has always been where God's presence is. The black stone we can now trace back all the way to the 2nd century BC. Once you take the black stone out of Petra and you flee to the south, you need allies. You ally yourself with the Abbasids who are up in Baghdad. Then the pilgrims follow where the black stone goes. Was not intentional that they created Mecca. They had to create Mecca because of the fact that the pilgrims were all coming to them. So what do? They recreate everything that was in Petra, they recreate in Mecca, but they don't use the same dimensions. And that's what's doing their undoing. And that's why Gibson has done such a great job showing that in Petra, all the material that you see in Petra, the 5 stages of the Hajj, take a look. They all fit to the dimensions that we see in Azraqi's material from the traditions. Azraqi showed the dimensions of the Kaaba. That you find in Petra. You don't find those dimensions in Mecca. Azraqi also talked about the 2 mountains of the Safa and Marwa that you run back and forth 7 times, mimicking what Hagar did to find water for Ishmael. That exactly can be found in Petra. They are mountains. Look in Mecca. They're just pieces of rock, facsimiles, 15 feet high. Those are not mountains. So in everything we're looking at, we're seeing that there is a predate, there is a precedent to almost everything Islam is talking about. The precedent comes from much further north. Everything we have seen. Look at the Qiblas. Look at the Qira'ats. You've been dealing with the Qira'ats. And notice where all the Qira'ats begin to appear. Why is it that of the 30 official Qira'ats that were finally standardized by Al-Jaziri, in 1429, that is the 15th century, 800 years later, take a look at them. 22 of them are from Basra, Kufa, and Damascus, and the majority of them are from Kufa. Why Kufa? Well, I'll tell you why Kufa. That used to be Hira. That is where the original Muhammad lived. That was Iyas ibn Qabisa lived. His nickname was Mohammad. He was a 7th century character. He was a king. He had responsibility for 30 towns. He is the one who in 622, do you see the date? 622? He is the one when Heraclius destroyed the Sassanids. He then takes over and has a reliance with the Jews. That's why he was seen as a safe pair of hands. But he was not a Muslim. He was a Christian. He was a Lakhmid Christian from the Lakhmid dynasty up there in Hira. And that's why 622 became important, because 622 is the date that the Arabs finally got their ascendancy, the Arabs finally got their identity, and they can now create that identity. Now, one last thing, Hatu, before you jump in. The inscriptions are highly damaging to Islam. The inscriptions are probably the best piece of literature we have because they are from the 7th century. I mentioned 30,000 of them. They are now been looked at. Lindstedt is probably the one who's, Ikka Lindstedt, who's done the greatest work on it. Look and see what he has found. He has looked at all the inscriptions from 640 up to 740. And he notices that all the inscriptions, all of them are coming from the north. There are no inscriptions in Mecca and Medina. If this was the center of power, if this was the center of the universe, is this where all the caliphs lived? If this is where Islam was being formed, why are there no inscriptions from down that far south? They are all coming from north, up near Petra. They're coming from up in Damascus. They're coming from what is today Israel, in Lebanon. That's where the inscriptions are coming. They're rock inscriptions. They're written in Arabic. They're written in Quranic Arabic. Look at that. They're written in Quranic Arabic. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the Aleph Maksura. They include the Tar Marbuta. They also include the Aleph. These are what you find in Quranic Arabic today. But that is not Arabic from Mecca, Medina. That is Arabic from Nabatean. It is Nabatean Aramaic. Those endings of words only come out of Nabatean Aramaic, which comes out of Petra, which is up in Jordan, 600 miles further north. What would they use, or what should have been used, or if Muhammad did live at the time of the beginning of the 7th century, what Arabic would he have used? He would have used Sabbaic Arabic from the Yemen. Sabbaic Arabic does have the 5 dots and does have the 3 vowels. Had he used that Arabic, we would have not had any Qira'ats. Your whole argument would not have even been any, your whole argument with your Kiraat and your holes in your narrative would not even, would be superfluous, because they would have not had any of these differences. They would have not had any problems with where you put the dots or you put the vowels, because they would have been written with the dots and vowels already in place, proving that the Quran was not written in Mecca and Medina. It was written up near Petra. And it was using Nabati and Sebek that did not have dots, did not have vowels. That's why at the end of the 7th century, going into the 8th century, they then had to impose those dots and vowels. But that was not imposed down in Mecca. That was not imposed down in Medina. That was all coming from Kufa. That's why all the qira'ats are from Kufa. Can you understand why the majority of the qira'ats, of the 30, 22 of them, of the 30, are from that part of the world? Because that's where the Arabic comes from, that's where that Quranic Arabic comes from, and that's where the dots and vowels were then being manipulated and traced, and they're, all the variants are coming out. We know as many as 700 different Qurans existed by the time that finally Al-Jaziri puts it down. Well, he's not the only one. You have Shabati in 1192, and you also, before that, Ibn Mujahid in 936. So those are the three that actually canonized the 30 Qurans. 936, 1192, and 1429. Look at the dates. These are all hundreds of years, 500, 800 years after Muhammad. And these men who did all this canonization, these Qurans from which they were choosing from, are all from the north. They are not anywhere near the south. They are nowhere near Mecca and Medina. Okay? Does that help you?
Have you got anything else?
I got a lot more if you want to keep going. That's just 5 of 30 slides that I have on this material. But those are probably the best ones to get the word out. Now let me get back to this argument from silence. What have I just done right now in the last 10 minutes? I have given you piece after piece after piece of evidence from the 7th century, have I not? The rock inscriptions. Prior to 690, there is no reference on any of the rock inscriptions up in the north. There's no evidence for anybody named Muhammad. There's no reference to any religion called Islam, no reference to any people called Muslims, no reference to any place called Mecca, and no reference to any Quranic material on these inscriptions. These are the earliest material that we have from the 7th century. That is evidence. No longer are we arguing from silence. That destroys that argument from silence. So when does Muhammad, as a man, as a person, when does he start to get introduced on the rock inscriptions? Not till 730. 730, that's 100 years after Muhammad, that he finally gets introduced as a person who is a prophet, who then has all these what we call these 5 pillars. The 5 pillars that we now see today get introduced at that time. So then the question needs to be asked, if I am arguing from silence, like everybody suggests that I have been doing, like we've been doing, they've been saying that for, since 1995, no longer are we arguing from silence, because we now have the coins to support us. We now have the Qiblas to support us. We now have the rock inscriptions to support us. We now have also the Arabic, the Nabatean Arabic to support us. We are, in fact, my question to Muslims is, we are the ones that no longer are arguing from silence. You are arguing from silence, because you cannot support one thing about your Muhammad in the 9th century. How many times in the debate did I turn to David and say, you have not dealt with this evidence? I'm looking for one reference on one coin, on one inscription, one reference to this man named Muhammad from the 7th century. Did you notice he was not able to answer one of those? In the entire debate of an hour, an hour and 50 minutes or whatever it was, he was not able to come up with one piece of evidence. Now listen, Muslims have tried. And that's why they've gone to the Ashtanami letter. That's why they've gone to the Doctrine of Iacobi. That's why they have gone to the Dome of the Rock. That's why they have gone to the 4 references to Muhammad in the Quran. These are all attempts to show that Muhammad had existed. That's why they've gone to the Constitution of Medina. I debunked every one of those in the debate. Those are easy to debunk. Not one of them's from the 7th century. Some of them don't even appear till the 16th century. So everything that Muslims have tried to come up with to try to find Muhammad in the 7th century, we have pretty much destroyed. And it's all happened in this year, in 2020. That's why this is just the first of many debates we're going to have. And I'm sorry for Muslims. Listen, you're right, Hatun. Doesn't matter whether or not David or I win that debate, Muhammad loses. But I think we need to start being honest as Christians. We need to start saying that if Muhammad did not even exist in the 7th century, and all these stories were created, listen, those stories did not come overnight. They came over a period of 200 to 300 years. It took them 200 to 240 years just to get his biography out there and to get his sayings out there. over 240 years, these stories were being bandied back and forth. They were being they were being attacked, and they were being revised and revised and revised. And that's why most Muslims want us to go back to Ibn Ishaq. They want us to go back to this guy here, Ibn Ishaq. And that's why even the Westerners are putting Ibn Ishaq's name on it. Even the Westerners are putting Ibn Ishaq's name. But this is not Ibn Ishaq's biography. This has nothing to do with Ibn Ishaq. We have nothing from Ibn Ishaq. This is 765. It looks like he did write a biography, but there's an awful lot of it that the Abbasids did not like about that biography. And that's why they had to rewrite it in 70 years later, from 765 all the way up to 833. Finally, Ibn Hisham has to write the new biography, and that's what we have in our hands today. If indeed this is from Ibn Hisham, we don't have the earliest manuscripts. So you can see from that 70-year period, there was an awful lot of manipulation going on. Take a look at Al-Bukhari. Al-Bukhari was given 6
jump in.
stories, and he threw out 98% and only retained 2%. What happened and what was in that 98%? Wouldn't you like to know?
It will be good to know, but let me just jump in and bring up some questions, Jay, if that's okay with you. So I think first I have to apologize for the first question because it really doesn't have any brain behind it, but let me bring it up. First question is, of course Muhammad was existed because his grave is in Medina, Jay. I told you, like, first, just that's the so far what we have, Jay. So while you are claiming there is no historical record of Muhammad, and then you are bringing coins and the writings and the direction of the Qibla, all those kind of things, we get to hear from Muslims that yes, Muhammad was existed because there is a grave in Medina.
Okay. Gibson actually deals with this, and he does a really good job. And he says, listen, if there was this material in Medina from the 7th century, why is it that when they were building these enormously tall buildings that they have all over Mecca right now and Medina, they're building skyscrapers, and these are the fourth highest building in the world, the clock tower. When you build large buildings like that, you have to go into the ground, you have to build foundations. As you dig foundations, you dig up an awful lot of artifacts that are archaic and ancient. And one of the first things that happens whenever large buildings are created in very old cities, you have archaeologists that come around and they want to see those artifacts, because from those artifacts you recreate the history of the city. Gibson went to a conference where there were these archaeologists were there, and he went and he asked this question from these archaeologists: what have you found in Mecca and Medina? Their response is, we have not found a thing except for one fort in Mecca, a Turkish fort from the Ottoman Empire from after 1300 AD. They can't find anything earlier than that. So when a Muslim comes to me and says, of course he existed because we have his tomb in Medina, I'd like for him to prove to me forensically that that tomb goes back to the 7th century.
Okay, next question is, Jay.
I've lost you.
Can you hear me?
Hold on a minute.
You should be able to hear me, because I know you pressed something wrong middle of your thing, but we were able to hear you. Can you hear me?
I can't hear you.
Okay.
Sorry.
The reason Jay can't hear us because
something's happened to.
Because Jay, while he was speaking, he pressed something and then sound changed. Jay, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So you are back.
Okay.
I'm
back again.
Okay. Next question is, what was at Mecca before the time of Abbasid?
The Abbasids. This is the $1 million question that we would like to find out. We can't find anything from Mecca, like I said earlier. We don't find any reference of anything that's prior to the Abbasid period. And I think the reason why is because this is what Patricia Crone brought out in her book, Meccan Trade and the Rise of Islam in 1987, which she got a death threat for writing it. And now this woman decided to ask this same question: what do we know about Mecca from the Abbasid period or earlier? And she found out that there was no reference of anything, no reference of on any coins, on any artifacts, on any inscriptions, on any documentation for Mecca until 741. 741 is just 8 years before the Abbasids come to power. And that reference to Mecca, as we just pointed out, and as I said in the debate on Saturday, that reference puts Mecca way up in southern Turkey, just below Edessa and above Haran. And that's the inscription is written in 741, but it's never considered to be the Mecca that we're
Sorry,
looking at today. It's
Jay,
just the
Jay,
name
Jay,
Mecca.
Jay. Sorry. Um, someone is calling me through Skype. Dear Mr. Mohammed, you called yesterday and then I said the same thing. If I am talking someone on the live stream when you call, it just change my screen. Please don't do that again. Call on Friday. Jay, would you mind being kind and repeat that for me because I missed listening it. Sorry.
Yeah, the first reference, if Mecca was such an important city, if it's where Adam and Eve went to when they were thrown out of the Garden of Eden, if in chapter 7 of the Quran, if it's where Abraham lived in chapter 21 of the Quran and rebuilt the Kaaba, then I would suggest it should be probably the most famous city in the history of mankind. So Patricia Corona, in her book in 1987, did a historical analysis of the city of Mecca, and she couldn't find any reference on any of the artifacts, on any of the trading documents. Now remember, Dr. Patricia Corona reads and writes 15 archaic languages. She reads all the languages that existed at that time from the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 6th, all the way up into the 7th century. She couldn't find any reference to a city called Mecca in any documentation whatsoever. Not until the Continuato Byzantia Arabica, which was written in 741 in the 8th century, just before the Abbasids come to power. That's the first reference she could find to the name Mecca itself. However, she didn't read the entire inscription. If you read the entire inscription, that Mecca, the city called Mecca, is just south of Edessa and above Haran in southern Turkey. What is southern Turkey today? But it was never considered to be a sanctuary. It was not Islamic. It was nothing more than the birthplace of where Abraham comes from. That was what it's known for. Now remember, back then in the 8th century, they believed that Abraham came, that Ur was up in southern Turkey. We now know since the 1800s, 1853, because of Dr. Taylor, that Ur is actually in southern Turkey. But they did not know that 1,000 years earlier. So what's fascinating, even that reference to Mecca is the wrong Mecca. It is not the Mecca of the traditions. So where and when did Mecca then come into existence? It looks like it's the Abbasids that chose Mecca, as I said earlier, because of Ibn Zubair, who fled from Abd al-Malik, who fled from the Umayyads, who brought the black stone with him. And in bringing the black stone with him, he also brought God's presence with him. And that's why once he fled down to where he came from, which is around the Taif, between Taif and Mecca, he then introduced along with the Abbasids, because he needed allies, he got the Abbasids from Baghdad, and they introduced Mecca because the pilgrims were coming. Once the pilgrims started following the Black Stone, they needed to put together a sanctuary, and they used the same references that they had already had, the same 5 stages of the Hajj, what they call the pilgrimage from Petra. They reproduced them in Mecca, but they reproduced them using the wrong dimensions. That's why we pretty well know today that Mecca today is nothing more than a facsimile of the earlier sanctuary, which was in Petra.
Okay. And next question is, what is the evidence that black stone was in Petra?
And he probably says, I can't find him. Very, very clearly, when you go to the traditions, you look and see what they say about Zubair. In the tradition, Zubair is the one that does destroy. He is the underling. He is the governor of Petra under Abd al-Malik from 685 to 687. In 687, he rebels against Abd al-Malik, and he destroys Petra, destroys the Kaaba, then runs with the black stone. It's all right there. He takes the black stone with him, realizing that once the black stone has left Petra, Petra really has no importance. Now, it's in the traditions. Is there any historical evidence? No, there is not. And like we've always been saying, we don't have historical evidence for the black stone, except we now know where the black stone comes from. And that's something I'm yet to introduce. That we will introduce that in a video. We now know where the black stone originally came from. It actually comes from Elagabalus. Hold on. We're going to show you, because you can see the trajectory of the black stone that starts all the way from the 2nd century AD. So it predates Islam by 500 years. And wherever the black stone was, God's presence remained. That's why it was brought to Petra by the Nabateans. And that's why those who then rebelled against the Nabateans, rebelled against the Umayyads, took it down to what is today the Hijaz. And that's why they then reintroduced the black stone on the new Kaaba. But the new Kaaba is the wrong dimension. It's too small. but it's still there today. However, notice it's not one stone. It's about 8 small stones. Why has it become 8 small stones? I'm not going to tell you yet. You're going to have to wait until we introduce that. That's something yet to be introduced.
Thank you for that. Next question is, how was Kaaba become Muslim worship place if Muhammad didn't exist?
No, the Kaaba, listen, there are many Kaabas. And this is where Hitti, if you look at Hitti's material, he describes, and this is something Tom Holland brought up too. If you look at Tom Holland's book that he came out in 2012, In the Shadow of the Sword, he mentions about that almost every major oasis had Kaabas. So Khaybar had a Kaaba. So did Yathrib have a Kaaba. So did Taif have a Kaaba. So did Nanjarat have a Kaaba. So did all these great cities along the what we call along the western the Western Plateau all had Kaabas. So did Petra have a Kaaba. Every major city had a Kaaba because that was where they used to be temples. These were Nabatean temples. And remember, the Kaaba is nothing more than a place where the Musaf al-Sharif, it's known as the Musaf al-Sharif in Arabic. And the Musaf al-Sharif is a place where you bow, or where you bow to, the holy place, the forbidden place where you bow to. So that was well known within the Nabatean era. And therefore the Kaaba, because every major city had a Kaaba, they were all vying for, not for in competition, it was what you would go to, it's where you would go to pay your allegiance of the existing gods from that city, and then pay your tribute, and then also basically pay your fee for remaining in that city before you moved on to the next city if you were a trader. So this was quite normal. Kaabas, there's the one in Petra, however, is the right dimension. The Kaaba that was there is the right dimension, according to Azraqi, for what we see in the traditions concerning the Kaaba. What is really rather ironic is the one in Mecca is the wrong dimension. It's too small.
Okay, thank you for that. What is the first manuscripts of the Quran revealed at which date?
I'm not going to tell you. That's yet to come. We're not going to get into that in this talk. This is not about manuscript evidence. We're all going to unpack every one of those manuscripts. We now have people who are doing PhD theses on almost every one of the major manuscripts. They are now coming up with dates that are not the same dates that you have heard up to date. You notice I'm saying date over and over again. Hold on. Stay tuned. We'll get to those manuscripts, and we're going to show you it's not what you think. You're out of words. No more questions.
No, because someone is just like buzzing through Skype, and it's changing my screen to find the questions. Okay. Please stop calling people, like seriously. Okay, the question is
okay, here's a question. I'm looking at it right here. Here's a good question by Daniel M. And he's saying, if Muhammad was fictional and made up by people, why did they also fabricate and make up miracles and actual prophetic authority for Muhammad? They actually did. Take a look at the traditions and see the miracles that they attribute to him. There's lots of miracles attributed to him. But one of the reasons, and here's what I want to ask, why did David take those miracles that are attributed to Muhammad and say that they are also authentic? Because there's miracles of him splitting the moon. There's miracles of him cursing the ground so the body cannot be buried there. There's miracles of him walking across the water. Why aren't those miracles, which come from the same material that the embarrassing material comes from, why David doesn't accept those miracles then, if he's also going to accept the fact that the embarrassing material is from the exact same period and from the exact same documents?
Thank you for that.
Now, let me just one step further. And how many of you really believe that Muhammad walked across water? How many really believe that Muhammad split the moon? If you're going to say that these embarrassing stories are true, then why aren't these other stories about his miracles true? You can't have it both ways, folks.
Just a side note, just a footnote on that. Remember, Quran denies Muhammad to make any miracles. Jay, a couple of more questions. Is there evidence?
Can I come back on that real quickly? It doesn't deny. It just says he won't do any miracles for the Jews at that time when they asked him to provide a miracle. So the traditions provide the miracles. But I'm saying the Quran is earlier than the traditions, right? So don't use the Quran as a pretext, because I would suggest, yes, that why don't they use the Quran and why don't they show? Because there's not much embarrassing of him in the Quran. Almost all the embarrassing material which you guys are using comes from the traditions which come another 100 to 150 years after the Quran.
Is there evidence that Muhammad or the Quran is made up in the Umayyad period?
Okay, good case in point. What do we know about the Umayyad period? Do you know what? Do you have any evidence from the Umayyad period, Hatun?
I cannot see the. Can you please stop calling from Skype, Mr. Mohammed, and
I think
another
he's doing.
Mr.
Listen,
something?
I think he's doing that purposely to try to shut down this
Yeah, but like
discussion.
it's just like changing my screen, and it just.
Okay, let's you and I talk then. Hatun, I've got it over here on mine. I can see what people are asking. Let's just you and I talk. If this is so just go back and ask me. If this is so that the Umayyads had an awful lot of material, what material do we have from the Umayyad period? Almost nothing. Isn't that interesting? Everything we have, everything you're dependent on, everything David and everybody else is dependent on is from the Abbasid period. It only begins to be introduced in 833, 840, 833, 835, 870, 875, up until 923. That's the 9th and 10th century. So the question remains, why is it that when we are so surprised when al-Buhari is given 600,000 of these akhbar, which I would suggest are Umayyad, and he takes and he destroys 98% and only retains 7,397. The other 98% that he did not accept, I would suggest, is from the Umayyad period. We don't have that today for one very good reason, because it's been destroyed by the Abbasids, who have a completely different narrative. And their narrative did not agree with the Umayyads, and that's why what we are now finding with the coins and with the inscriptions and also with the Qiblas, that is from the Umayyad period. That is from the 7th century. Can you then understand why we're making our point? Basically, we're saying we need to go back. Why is it we don't have any reference to Ilyas ibn Qabisa, except al-Buhari does refer to him. He calls him Qabisha. That's the man we should have been looking for. And that's the one who actually created the Arab hegemony and started the Arab identity and started the Arab, basically the Arab, it's not an empire, because the empire did not really begin until Muawiyah finally capitalized on it and created it in 661. But for 40 years, the Arabs were starting to take over ascendancy. And that's why when finally in 661, Muawiyah then creates that first Umayyad Caliphate. That, interestingly, we don't find anything earlier than that. That all then has been eradicated by the Abbasids. And that's one reason why it takes them 200 to 240 years to write down the story of this man and to write down the sayings of this man.
Just a practical question, Jay. So, people are asking if you are able to share with individuals the presentation you did on the debate. Is that accessible for individuals to have access?
They do, but the difficulty is how to get it to them, because I do not want to put my email out there for them to, otherwise I'll get inundated. As you well know, once you put your personal email out there, it gets inundated. Let me just say this, however. We are about to go from public with the Pfander website. On the Pfander website, I will put up all 30 of the slides that I used in the debate, and we will continue to embellish them because there's many new slides. Every one of those slides, every one of those pictures that I put up in the debate takes about 15 minutes to unpack. They are summaries of the entire argument. So every slide is a cheat sheet. That's what we call a cheat sheet. All the information you need is in every one of those slides for every one of the 30 arguments. That we will put up on Pfander. It'll take about 2 or 3 more weeks yet before we have it. And I want people to use it. Feel free to undownload any of that. Once you can download it, laminate it, and then start introducing it with your Muslim friends. They need to see it. Others need to see it, because we need to shut down this idea that there was ever a Muhammad, or there ever was a Quran, or there ever was an Islam, or there ever was a place called Mecca in the 7th century. That did not exist. Not that early and not that far south. Up north, it was beginning to exist, but it did not come together by one man receiving a revelation from God. It came from political exigency as different groups were confronting each other politically, and how they, from one dynasty to another, and finally the dynasty that won out, then created the Muhammad that we have today. But it wasn't that they created ex nihilo. They use existing stories, they use existing data, and they use existing archaeological evidence to then support what they then know as what we now know today as Islam. See, what everybody else is telling me, and what you are all telling me, is that this great religion, with all its rules, regulations, and all its sophistication, came together in a 22-year period, from 610 to 632. Absolutely not. I don't know of any other empire this great, with this many rules and regulations, with this much sophistication and theological precepts, to have been created in just 22 years. What I'm saying is it did not happen in 22 years. It happened in 200 to 240 years, and possibly even 300 years. That makes sense. And it makes sense out of really two great empires that were fighting for ascendancy, and in contradistinction to an even greater empire, the Byzantine Christian Empire in the north. And that's why almost all the debates, all the theology is against the Christian Byzantine, because they are their greatest threat. That would make sense in the political environment that we now see Islam emerging. But it would not make sense between 610 and 632, when this city didn't exist, when this man didn't exist, when none of these theological debates would have even existed. There were no Jews living in the Hijaz. Not at all. We don't find any reference to Jews living in Mecca and Medina. So how could there be any reference after reference against Judaism and against Christianity? The Quran is full of references against these two religions, unless, of course, the Quran was written much later. Up in Kufa, much further north, where you have the seminaries, where you have both the Christian and the Jewish seminaries there in Kufa. Now it makes sense why the Quran is so anti-Christian and so anti-Jewish.
Jay, when is the date that your website is going to go live?
I can't give you that. I don't dare to give that. Please don't write it down, because then I'll have to be held accountable to it. And I get all kinds of people yelling and screaming, "You said this on her show, therefore we want to see it." It'll be fander.org. I think either fander.org.uk or fander.com. We have been given rights to it. I have a man working on it right now. It all depends on when he can get it up and running.
Okay, so we will keep eye on it once you publish those materials, so we get access and use them.
Hatun, let me just say one thing real quickly here. I am very much like you. You are a one-woman show. I'm a one-man show. I do not have a team around me. I don't have all these experts. I have to write all my own papers. I have to put up all my own videos. I have to edit all my own videos.
Okay.
I then have to upload all my. You do the exact same thing. And therefore,
okay.
People want so much from us. They want us to have had it up there yesterday. And I say, people, please hold on. We don't have teams around us who are experts. We have to do it all ourselves. Therefore, I will try to get it up there as quick as possible. But I cannot promise you anything right now, and certainly not on this show, because I see over almost 500 people are watching it at the moment, and I do not want to disappoint any of them.
So let me kind of I need to go, but I just want to kind of ask one more question, two questions actually. I think we will have you as a follow-up on this discussion, because I didn't have that much time to keep you on. But so when on the debate, when David Wood destroyed you, and then offered you your poem for the rap, what did you how did you feel about it?
Oh, I felt sorry for the rapper.
You felt sorry for the rapper? Why?
He messed it up royally. Listen, you cannot rap that unless you know it to give. That's not fair to him. It was not fair to him. It is the hardest thing to read, even for me to have read, because it follows a cadence, a particular cadence that goes to superfragilisticexpialidocious. If anybody knows that supercalifragilistic is absolutely nonsensical, that's the reason why I put it to that music, because everything in there is nonsensical. How can you then rap it and try to come up with a beat on it, and on top of that, come up with some type of rhyme and rhythm? You can see after about halfway through, he finally gave up and says, please, I'm sorry, I cannot go any further. And I felt so sorry. David should not have put him up to that, because it's much too difficult to do.
I thought it was so fun. Have you got the poem for us, Jay?
Do I have it with me? Yeah.
Would you like to kind of finish with that one?
Well, could you give me about 2 minutes while I go get it? Because I don't see it here. It's somewhere. It's in my bags. I haven't even unpacked it yet. Yeah. So if you can give me 2 minutes, I'll be right back.
Okay, I'm counting.
Oh, wait, I do have it here.
Okay, I stopped counting then.
No, just wait. Let me get it up. You keep talking while I unpack it, and then I'll have it in front of it. So people.
While Jay finds the poem, let me just summarize once again. Debate which took place between Jay Smith and David Wood was helpful for us as a Christians who actually do the work of evangelist, in the intention, if we are using David Wood's argument, Islam is getting destroyed. If you are using Jay Smith's argument, Islam is getting destroyed in both sides. So And it is important that both arguments are being practiced. Both arguments are being practiced because it is wherever it stands, it still takes Muslims to hell. And eternal Son of God, Lord Jesus Christ, build a bridge, not with Islam, but for people, so that those people whom he died for can walk through that bridge. Therefore, if you are not satisfied with the both sides presentation or with any side's presentation, I am sure we can make it accessible for you to bring up your questions and then learn the arguments and then practice it and then see what is the comeback from Muslims, and then arguments can develop and become better if there are any holes in it. Yes, have you got the poem ready, Jane?
I've got it right here. Okay, now remember, this poem summarizes everything I said for the debate. So all 30 ideas are in this poem. That's why I put it together. I did it first on your show a few weeks ago, Hatun, and then I've added 5 new verses to really confront David.
Okay, maybe we don't need that part. Let's go with the one you shared in my live stream.
Okay, let's do it together. Here we go. We all know well Muhammad's name. He's been around a while. He lived in Mecca, so we're told, his prophethood's on file. Yet no one saw him face to face, nor heard him speak a word. And all we know is centuries old, and that's downright absurd. Hisham, who wrote his story down, lived 2 centuries too late. Bukhari, who wrote what he said, lived at a later date. And there was just nothing written down that they borrowed from hearsay and lived in towns way far to north, hundreds of miles away. And so it seems it's all made up by Abbasids, we're told, who sought to purge all previous views and introduce their mold. They needed an identity different from those before. They had no book, they had no man, they needed something more. Muhammad was the name they chose, and Mecca was his town. The Quran was his special book, each word and letter sound. Yet that which they say came from God was written down by men who lived in Iraq, far to north, not even from his ken. The final version they call Hafs was not one of the best. He lied and cheated all the time, much worse than all the rest. The Arabic which it contained, from Hijaz it was thought, its grammar letters just weren't right, especially without dots. So where did it originate? Where could it have come forth? Southern Levant is where it hails, again, too far, too north. The mosque became their focal point, their qiblas were confused. When Gibson found they pointed north, he was indeed bemused. Yet what about Muhammad's name? It's nowhere to be found. The Hijaz is the place he walked, yet nothing's on the ground. The rock inscriptions are all blank. You'd think they'd say much more. Of him, we cannot find a trace. He's really just folklore. The coins are equally opaque. Of him, there's not a beep. Perhaps they went on holiday or maybe fell asleep. His town Mecca, where he grew up and where he sought his fate, was not known until 741, 100 years too late. Many have said he wrote letters and sent them all abroad. The Ashtanami is one case, but it has proved a fraud. The Medinan Constitution supposedly is true, but it makes too many mistakes. Its truths are all too few. The Doctrina Iokobi is also claimed as true, but their own man was in Jerusalem, turns out to be a Jew. Muhammad did not really live. His story is a lie. No one can find him anywhere, no matter how they try. Without Muhammad, Islam dies. It flits and floats away. Since we now know he didn't exist, Islam has had its day.
Thank you very much for that, Jay.
You want me to do the other 5 strophes for David?
No, it's fine. Is that poem has a copyright or something?
No, you can have it.
Okay.
I made it for you, Hatun. It was for your week where you were taking on Muhammad. So this is really your poem. It's my gift to you.
That was Muhammad's birthday present, and it is, since he wasn't existed, I think we can share between us.
You can have it. You can use it. Just don't abuse it.
Thank you. Thank you very much for joining us and helping us to rethink whether Muhammad was existed or not. I think we will have you as a follow-up so that people will learn the arguments and then they put in the practice and then see how the groundwork takes place. And also,
Hatun, can I just say one thing real quickly? Yeah. For those of you, please go on Mel Sneakers Corner. Go to Sneakers Corner YouTube site. Look and see what he and Murad and Bala and also Joe, those four guys. Look what they're coming up with. They're now putting forth and are putting down 20 years of research. This is not something that's overnight. This is all well researched, and everything they are saying, they support and they source in history. Okay, John, I want to give that shout out for them because they are amazing guys, and I'm working with them, and I feel privileged to be on their team.
Good. And it is amazing that in the body of Christ, we all have different gifts, and good thing is we want to be faithful and use the gifts Lord is giving to us. And beloved ones, thank you very much for joining us on the late live stream. May crucified and risen Lord silent you with his love. And dear Muslim friends, rethink who you worship, who you follow, who you want to obey. And our prayers is that you will worship not Mohammad, you not obey not Mohammad, but come to eternal Son of God, Lord Jesus Christ, because by believing in him, only you will have eternal life. God bless you all, and we will see you tomorrow. Jay, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.